Dustfire Tavern sat on the edge of the starport like a wound in the desert. Its walls were cracked, the lights flickered, and the air smelled of old smoke and sour drinks. No one came here for peace. They came to forget, to gamble, to fight, or to trade things better left in the shadows. Inside, the noise was loud. Alien smugglers played cards, bounty hunters counted coins, and a few drunk traders yelled at the broken music machine. In the darkest corner, a human man sat quietly, sipping his drink alone. His name was Cal Rayner, a simple mechanic who had just finished a long cargo job. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. But tonight, fate had brought him to the right place. Or maybe the wrong one. Suddenly, the tavern door burst open. A large, red-skinned alien stumbled in. His breath stank of strong drink, and his arms pulled behind him two chained girls. They were thin, dirty, and shaking. One had short silver hair and glowing yellow eyes. The other had blue skin and long white hair that covered half her face. Their clothes were torn, and metal collars were locked around their necks. The alien dragged them to the bar and shouted, "One drink. Just give me one damn drink for these two." The tavern laughed. "Slaves again, Borax," someone called out. "They look half dead. Not worth a credit." Borax waved his hand. "Don't care, just need my drink. Take 'em or leave 'em." The girls looked around, their eyes full of fear and sadness. No one moved. No one cared, until Cal stood up. He walked slowly through the crowd, his eyes fixed on the girls, not the alien. His voice was calm. "You're trading both of them? For one drink?" Borax turned, surprised. "You deaf, human? One drink. That's all I want." Cal looked at the girls again. They were quiet, barely breathing, chained, hurt, afraid. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a bottle of dark liquid, and placed it on the table. "This is from Earth," he said. "Worth more than any drink in this dump." Borax snatched the bottle, opened it, sniffed, then laughed. "Deal." He tossed the chains to Cal and walked away, already drinking. The tavern fell silent for a moment. No one laughed now. Some stared. Others looked away. A few whispered. Cal crouched in front of the girls. He didn't touch them. "My name is Cal," he said gently. "You're free now. Come with me. I won't hurt you." The silver-haired one looked up slowly. Her eyes glowed like fire, but with caution, not anger. The blue one didn't move. She kept her head down and hands clenched. Cal didn't force them. He simply stood and said, "I'm going to my ship. You can come if you want. You don't owe me anything." Then he walked out into the night. For a moment, the girls stayed still. Then, slowly, the silver-haired one stood, helping the other up. Together they followed the human into the dark. Cal's ship wasn't fancy. It was old, patched together with spare parts, and named the Emberhawk. But it had a warm bed, clean water, and safety. He brought them inside, gave them food, and left them alone in a small room. He didn't ask questions, didn't chain them, didn't speak unless needed. The silver-haired girl watched everything with sharp eyes. She sat between the door and the other girl, like a protector. Later that night, Cal walked past the room and paused. He heard soft crying. The blue-skinned girl was whispering something in another language, over and over. Cal didn't understand the words, but the pain in her voice was clear. He didn't go in. He just stood outside the door and said quietly, "You're safe now." The crying stopped. The next morning, both girls sat at the table when Cal brought breakfast. The silver-haired one stared at him but said nothing. The blue one kept her head down. Cal smiled gently. "You don't have to talk. Just eat." They didn't respond, but they ate, and that was a start. As the sun rose over the desert world, Cal didn't know their names. He didn't know their past. He didn't know what kind of trouble he had just invited into his ship, but something inside him whispered, these girls were not what they seemed, and someone, somewhere, might already be looking for them. The Emberhawk glided through the upper atmosphere of the desert moon, its engines humming low. Inside the ship, the silence between the three passengers said more than any words. Cal sat in the control room, pretending to focus on the monitor screen. But his ears stayed tuned to the hallway behind him. He had been alone on this ship for so long that even soft footsteps or quiet breathing sounded loud now. The two girls were still in the back room, resting, maybe sleeping. He hadn't asked for their names. He hadn't touched their chains. He only left them food, clean water, and space. But still, they hadn't spoken a single word. The silver-haired girl watched everything with a cold, sharp stare. She stood between Cal and the blue-skinned girl like a wall. Her yellow eyes never blinked when he entered the room. She didn't trust him, but she wasn't afraid. She was protective. But the blue girl, she was different. She hadn't said a single thing. She didn't look at Cal. She flinched at loud sounds. She sometimes curled up in the corner and whispered things in her sleep. Once, when Cal brought her a blanket, she pressed her face into it and wept quietly for almost an hour. He didn't know what she had seen. He didn't ask. That night, Cal brought them a soft meal, cooked roots, protein cubes, and fresh water. The silver-haired girl ate carefully, eyes still locked on him. The blue-skinned girl only touched the bread. Her fingers trembled as she picked at it like it might disappear. "You don't have to be scared," Cal said gently. "I'm not going to sell you, I'm not going to hurt you." The silver-haired girl blinked slowly but said nothing. The blue one didn't even look up. Cal sighed. "At least tell me your names." Silence. He stood, took the empty bowls, and turned to leave. But as he reached the doorway, a soft voice whispered behind him. "Leary." He froze. The word was so quiet he almost thought it was in his head. He turned slowly. The blue girl still didn't look up, but her lips had moved. "Leary?" he repeated. She nodded. Barely. Cal smiled gently. "Thank you." He looked at the other girl. "And you?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, but after a moment she spoke. "Vesa." That was all, but it was enough. Later that night, while Cal worked on engine repairs, he checked the ship's ID scanner. It was a small device that could read any data left in collars or implants. Just in case, he'd taken the metal collars off the girls earlier, but something about them still felt strange, heavy, old. He placed one of the collars into the scanner. The screen blinked. Then text appeared, coded in Old Imperial dialect. The data was protected, locked. But one word flashed clearly across the screen. Property of House Ralzen. Cal stared at the name. Ralzen was no small family. It was a ruling bloodline. From the core systems, rich, powerful, dangerous, known for cruelty, known for secrets. Why would two girls from that house be chained and sold on a dirt moon bar? He checked deeper. One collar held a name tag. Subject Leary Prototype 7. Prototype? His chest tightened. Was Leary even alive? Or something more? He ran to the room. The girls were awake, sitting on the floor. "Leary," he said softly. "Is that your real name?" She looked up at him. Her eyes were wide, afraid, but she nodded again. "Do you remember where you're from?" he asked. She hesitated. "I remember the lab, the bright lights, pain, then Vesa." She pulled me out. Vesa stood suddenly, blocking Leary. Her voice was stronger now. "Don't ask more. I'm not trying to hurt her," Cal said calmly. "But someone is. Someone dangerous. We need to know who." Vesa didn't move. "I scanned. The collar," Cal explained. "You were property of House Ralton, that's not a mistake." Vesa's face turned hard. "We escaped them, we don't want to go back." "You won't," Cal said firmly. "Not while you're with me." Leary looked at him. Really looked. For the first time. Her soft voice whispered, "Why?" Cal knelt beside her. "Because no one should be bought. Not for a drink. Not for money. Not ever." Vessa's hands slowly lowered from her guard stance. For the first time, her eyes softened. They didn't smile, they didn't hug, but the silence between them was no longer filled with fear. It held something new: trust. The Emberhawk soared quietly across the black sky, its engines humming like a low whisper. Cal had changed course twice already, taking no chances. He didn't trust the local systems, not after scanning those collars, not after learning that. Leary was marked as a prototype by one of the galaxy's most dangerous houses. Down below on a swamp planet named Theral, Cal planned to stop for repairs and supplies. A hidden outpost there was known to be neutral, no questions asked, no tracking beacons. Just mechanics, traders, and ghosts trying to disappear. Vessa didn't like it. As the ship landed, she stood at the door with her arms crossed. "You said it was safe." "It is," Cal replied, strapping on his tool belt. "No law, no scanners. I just need 2 hours." Vessa looked past him at the swamp trees and mist. "It feels wrong." Cal gave a small smile. "Trust me." That was the first mistake. The marketplace was quiet but tense. Mud clung to metal boots. Strange creatures hissed from cages. Traders wore masks to hide their faces. Cal walked quickly, gathering food rations and power coils, keeping his head down. Back at the ship, Leary sat near the engine room window, watching bugs crawl along the swamp glass. Her pale fingers traced little shapes on the window. She didn't speak much today. Her eyes were tired, and something in the air made her nervous. Vessa sat near her with a knife in hand, sharpening the blade slowly. "We won't stay here long," she said. "He promised." Leary looked at her. "Do you think we'll be chased again?" Vessa paused, then nodded. "Yes." Leary didn't cry. She just turned back to the window. "Then I hope Cal runs fast." In the market's fuel yard, Cal paid a trader and carried a small generator across his back. That's when he noticed it. 2 cloaked figures watching him from a distance. Their eyes glowed faint blue. Too still. Too quiet. Not locals. He moved. Faster. Heading toward the exit. Then his communicator buzzed. "Ship perimeter breach." The computer voice whispered in his ear. 2 life forms approaching." Cal dropped the generator and ran. Back at the Emberhawk, Vessa heard the soft crunch of feet outside. Her ears twitched. She stood quickly, pulling Leary behind her. Then, a knock. Not loud. Just slow and deliberate. "Vessa," whispered, "stay back." She opened the door just a crack and a hand shot forward, grabbing her arm. She spun fast and slashed, cutting across metal fingers. The figure outside growled and shoved through the door. It wasn't a normal bounty. Hunter. It was synthetic. Its face was part metal, part flesh, cold white eyes. A symbol burned into its chest. Ralzen. Vessa pushed Leary back and grabbed a stun rod. She struck the attacker in the side, but it didn't fall. Another figure climbed in through the window. Leary screamed. Cal arrived seconds. Later, breath sharp, hands ready. He saw the broken door and heard the fight inside. He grabbed a wrench, kicked the door open, and froze. 2 synthetic bounty units were inside. One had pinned Vessa to the wall. The other had Leary cornered. "Target acquired," one of them said in a flat voice. "Prototype 7 must be returned." Cal didn't think. He ran straight at the nearest one and slammed the wrench into its skull. Sparks flew. It stumbled. Vessa twisted free and flipped over the couch, grabbing her knife. The second bounty lunged at Leary, but she screamed, and something happened. A shockwave burst from her body. The lights flickered, the walls shook, and the bounty was thrown across the room like a rag doll. Everyone froze, even Vessa stared. Leary's hands trembled. Her eyes were glowing, bright white like burning stars. Cal grabbed her arm gently. "Leary, what was that?" She was breathing hard. "I don't know. It just happened." The first bounty groaned and tried to stand. Vessa didn't wait. She jumped on it and drove her blade through its neck. The machine sparked, then collapsed. Cal pulled Leary close. "We need to go now." 10 minutes later, the Emberhawk was in the air again, climbing into the sky with engines screaming. Cal sat at the controls, sweat dripping from his brow. Vesa stood behind him, arms tight around Leary. Cal finally spoke. They found you. That means they've been tracking the collars, or... They want her back, Vesa said. She's more than a girl. She's their secret, their weapon. Leary looked at them both. I don't want to go back. You won't, Cal said firmly. They'll have to go through me. A quiet moment passed. Then Leary leaned her head against Vesa's shoulder and whispered, I remember something. A place. A room with glass walls, a code word. Something called Project Eden. Vesa's eyes widened. Cal's heart sank. They weren't just running from bounty hunters now. They were running from something designed, controlled, and never meant to escape. The Emberhawk drifted through deep space, far from any known route. The stars outside blinked like eyes watching from a distance. Inside the ship, silence settled after the fight, but it wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, full of questions. Cal sat at the workbench in the engine room, the two metal collars lying in front of him. He'd opened them carefully, pulled wires apart, and exposed the tiny chip buried deep inside each one. But these weren't normal tracking collars. They were coated with something ancient and dangerous. He connected one chip to his datapad and ran a deep scan. The result: access denied. Classified: Project Eden. Level 9 clearance required. His chest tightened. That name again: Project Eden. Leary had whispered it like a dream. But now it was real. And that scared him more than bounty hunters or alien lords. He downloaded what little he could, just fragments of code and strange notes. Prototype 7. Active. Memory suppression failed. Organic interface successful. Emotion signals unpredictable. Assigned to Guardian Unit VX-92, Vesa. He leaned back in his chair, shocked. Vesa was assigned to protect Leary? He suddenly realized Vesa hadn't just rescued Leary by chance. It was programmed into her. Or worse, she had been trained for it. In the crew quarters, Leary sat curled in a chair, a blanket around her. Her glowing eyes were dim now, her energy drained after the blast that threw the bounty hunter across the room. Vesa sat beside her, staring at the wall. Are you mad at me? Leary asked softly. Vesa shook her head. No, just thinking. About what? Vesa turned toward her. About who I really am. Leary's face went still. You don't know. I knew I was trained, Vesa said quietly. To fight. To guard. But I didn't remember who gave the orders. Now I do. Leary reached out, touched her hand gently. You protected me before. That was real. I don't know if it was a mission or a choice, Vesa whispered. You chose, Leary said firmly. I felt it. Vesa looked at her and gave the smallest nod. Cal entered a moment later, holding the datapad. His expression was serious. I found part of the truth, he said. You weren't sold by accident. You were property. Leary, you're not just a girl. You were built, grown. Something between a person and a weapon. Leary shrank into the chair. So I'm not real? Cal crouched beside her. You are real. I've seen the way you cry, laugh, get scared, trust. Machines don't do that. Whatever they made you for, they failed. You became something else. What, about me? Vesa asked quietly. Cal showed her the scan. You're marked as Guardian Unit VX-92, combat class. That means you were made or trained to guard Leary. Maybe since the start. Vesa didn't look surprised. That's why I feel what she feels. Why I can't leave her. Cal stood up. This isn't just about you two anymore. If Project Eden was real and you both escaped it, they'll keep sending people. Or worse, send. Things that look like people. Leary hugged her knees. I don't want to hurt anyone again. You didn't, Cal said. You protected yourself. That power came from pain, but maybe now, it can come from purpose. She looked up at him. What purpose? Cal hesitated. We find the place where you were made. We break the system. We make sure they never take another girl again. Vesa stepped forward. You'll help us do that? Yes. Why? She asked. Cal looked at them both. Because I've seen people used, thrown away, and called worthless. I couldn't save them, but maybe I can save you. For the first time, Vesa didn't look guarded. She didn't glare or protect. She simply said, "Then we stand together." A few hours later, they all sat at the main screen, pulling up old star maps and restricted zones. It was Leary who noticed something odd. Here, she pointed. This space doesn't show on trade routes, but my dreams always show a red planet with rings like fire. Cal zoomed in. There was no name on the map, just a number, Sector 9X, Eden Core. Vesa whispered, "That's where it started." Leary looked at Cal. "Will you take us there?" He nodded. "I'll get you there, and I won't let anyone hurt you on the way." The girls didn't say, "Thank you." They didn't need to. They trusted him now. Outside, stars passed by in silence. But in the heart of the Emberhawk, something powerful was growing. Not a weapon, not a mission, but a bond strong enough to face the shadows of their past. The Emberhawk drifted through deep space, headed toward a place no sane traveler dared visit. Sector 9X, a red-ringed world that didn't appear on maps and was spoken of only in hushed voices. But inside the ship, something quiet and unexpected had begun to bloom. Not fear, not pain, but trust. Leary now walked without looking over her shoulder. Her hands no longer shook when she sat at the table. Her voice, though soft, had gained steadiness. Vesa stopped sharpening her blade every night. She no longer stood guard while Leary slept. Instead, she slept beside her on a bed of old blankets, shoulder to shoulder, like sisters. And Cal, he wasn't just their rescuer anymore. He was their anchor. Each morning he brought them food and taught them how to clean the ship's controls. Vesa learned how to repair loose wires. Leary learned how to read words in BASIC. She liked the word home. She traced it again and again in her notebook. One afternoon, while fixing a power panel, Vesa turned to Cal. "You're not like the other humans." Cal glanced over, wiping grease from his hands. "You've met many?" "No. But I watched. Recordings, they all shouted, they looked hungry for something. And me? You're quiet. Like a shield that doesn't need to shine." Cal chuckled. "That's a first." Leary, sitting nearby, smiled. "You're kind. Kind is better than shiny." Later that evening, they gathered in the small kitchen corner. Cal tried cooking something called spice stew, a mess of alien roots and earth spices. The smell was strange, but the taste made Leary laugh for the first time. It wasn't a loud laugh, just a little giggle. It stopped Vesa mid-bite. Cal looked over. "You okay?" Leary nodded, hand over her mouth. That tasted like dirt and stars at the same time. Vesa tilted her head. "I don't get it." "I don't either," Leary said, still smiling. But it felt warm. They didn't say the word out loud, but all three felt it in the room. Family, but peace doesn't last forever. 2 days before reaching Sector 9X, a warning beep echoed through the control room. Cal jumped from the engine bay and checked the screen. Signal detected. Tracking beacon activated. Unregistered ship. Approaching. "Not possible," he muttered. "We ditched the collars. No one should have found us." But someone had. A fast, dark ship appeared on the edge of the sensors. No markings, no ID code. Silent. Deadly. Vesa stood behind him, arms tight. "They've found us." "How?" Cal said. Leary entered slowly, her eyes already wide. "I had a dream. I saw something coming. Metal wings. Fire in its mouth." Cal looked at the screen. The ship approaching had a long pointed front that glowed red, almost like a dragon. He whispered. The enemy ship didn't speak. It didn't send a message. It simply locked on and fired, A red beam scorched past the Emberhawk, missing by inches. "Hold on," Cal shouted, flipping switches. The Emberhawk spun hard, its old engines screaming. Sparks flew from the wall. Leary held on to the railing. Eyes shut. Vesa took the co-pilot seat and strapped in. "They're faster," she said, "but not smarter." Cal grinned. "Think you can fly?" "I can fight. Close enough." They twisted through a debris field. Old satellites, broken ships, even an asteroid with a crashed beacon still blinking. Cal ducked behind it, buying them seconds. "Leary," he called back. "Go to the engine room. Flip the yellow valve and hit the green button. Got it?" She nodded and ran. Inside the engine room, the walls vibrated. The ship shook. Dust fell. But Leary found the valve, twisted it hard, and slammed the green button. Back in the cockpit, Cal smirked. "Engine boost activated. Time to run." The Emberhawk shot forward like a comet. Behind them, the enemy ship struggled to turn. "We're not safe yet," Vesa said. Cal's voice was calm. "We're alive, that's step one." An hour later, the ship floated quietly again. The stars outside were peaceful, as if nothing had happened. Leary sat with her back to the engine door, breathing softly. Vesa crouched beside her, wiping dust from her cheek. "You were brave," Vesa said. "You trusted me," Leary replied. "I wanted to do something that helped." Cal came in, rubbing his neck. "That move saved us." Leary looked up. "I'm not just something they made. Cal shook his head. "No, you're something they couldn't control. That's why they're afraid." Vesa looked at Cal. "And what about you?" He smiled. "I'm just the guy who made friends with two girls the galaxy forgot." Leary giggled again. Vesa smiled, just barely. That night they sat around the control room together, watching the stars roll by. For once, no one cried. No one sharpened a knife. No one planned to run. They just sat together. Whatever waited for them on Sector 9X, they would face it as one. The red rings of Sector 9X spun slowly outside the Emberhawk's windows, like glowing chains in the void. The world beneath them was dark, lifeless, and covered in thick clouds that shimmered with storm lightning. No cities, no lights, no life. But Leary knew this place. As they hovered above the planet's surface, her hands gripped the edge of her seat. Her voice was barely a whisper. "This is where they made me." Vesa stood behind her, shoulders tense. "Then this is where it ends." Cal looked out over the stormy clouds. He had landed on dangerous planets before, but something about this place felt wrong. Like the air itself wanted them gone. "This planet isn't just hiding secrets," he said. "It is the secret." They didn't know the hidden ship had already followed them. An hour later, they touched down near what looked like a broken mountain. But as the clouds thinned, the rocks below revealed a massive steel door, half buried, half open. A symbol above the door flickered. It was the same symbol burned into Leary's collar. Project Eden. They stepped outside together. Cal carried a scanner. Vesa held her blade. Leary walked slowly, every step pulling memories out of the dark corners of her mind. "I remember these stones," she whispered. "I used to stand here with others, but they're all gone now." Inside the base, the air was cold and silent. Dust coated the floor. Walls flashed with dying lights. Broken machines lined the halls like skeletons. The whole place looked dead until it spoke. "Welcome back, Prototype 7. Leary froze. The voice came from the walls. Deep. Empty. Watching. Cal turned quickly. "Who was that?" Vesa stepped in front of Leary. "We're not alone." Then the lights came on. One by one, glowing panels lit the hall, leading to a circular chamber. Inside that chamber stood 5 figures, not men, not machines, but something in between. Tall, metal-skinned, eyes like frozen stars. Each wore the same symbol on their chest, Eden's seal. One stepped forward. "Guardian VX-92, you have failed your directive." Vesa stood tall. "I chose to protect her, not obey you." Another figure spoke. That was not your choice to make. Then their heads turned toward Cal. And you, human male, unauthorized contact with classified material. Cal raised his hands. She's not material. She's a person. The first figure replied without emotion. She is a weapon, designed to absorb emotional data and release it as energy. You've compromised her evolution. Vessa's grip on her blade tightened. She's more than your experiment. Cal, he took a step forward. I don't care what she was made for. I've seen her laugh, cry, care. That means she has a soul. One of the figures raised a hand, and a shockwave blasted across the room. Cal flew backward, hitting the wall hard. Leary screamed. Cal! The room exploded into motion. Vessa moved like lightning. Her blade flashed, slicing through metal limbs. But the Guardians were strong. Too strong. One grabbed her by the throat and threw her across the floor. Leary rushed to Cal's side. He was breathing but hurt. Blood ran from his forehead. You need to run, he said weakly. But Leary shook. Her head. Not this time. She stood, eyes glowing white. Her voice echoed unnaturally. You called me a weapon. Let me show you what that means. The ground beneath her cracked. Air vibrated. The Guardians turned, but too late. A wave of light burst from her body, not wild like before, but focused, controlled. One Guardian melted in seconds. Another was thrown into the wall, its body sparking. The last three advanced, but Vessa was back on her feet. She moved beside Leary and nodded once. Together they attacked. Vessa struck with blades and precision. Leary followed with bursts of white energy that bent walls and shattered steel. Within minutes, all 5 Guardians were down, smoking, silent, gone. The chamber grew quiet. Cal slowly stood, holding his ribs. He looked at the 2 girls who had once been scared, silent, and chained. Now they stood tall. Free. Powerful. Why didn't you run? He asked. Vessa wiped her blade. Because you never did. Leary walked over and hugged him tightly. Because you believed in me. When I didn't believe in myself. They stayed like that for a long moment. Then in the center of the room, a panel opened. A small device rose from the floor. It blinked. Leary stepped toward it. A message played. It was her voice. Young, scared, and recorded long ago. If someone finds this, please stop them. We were just kids. We didn't want to be weapons. We just wanted to be loved. Leary's eyes filled with tears. Vessa placed a hand on her shoulder. Cal looked at them both. Let's make sure no one else is ever made like you again. They nodded. Together. The Emberhawk lifted off from the ruined planet of Sector 9X as the old Eden base crumbled behind them, swallowed by fire and falling stone. There would be no more weapons built there, no more girls made in silence, no more pain. Inside the ship, the mood was quiet, not sad, just still. Like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what the future might feel like now that the past had finally let go. Cal sat in the pilot's seat, his ribs wrapped, his head still bandaged, but his eyes were steady, the stars in front of him stretched out like a path with no end. Vessa stood near the window, arms crossed, gaze focused on the dark space beyond. She'd always looked like a fighter, sharp, guarded, dangerous. But now her shoulders were softer, her eyes less hard. She no longer looked like a machine ready to break. She looked like someone who had finally been allowed to rest. Leary sat, on the floor beside Cal's chair, legs crossed, sketching something in a notebook. She had started drawing after the battle. Small, simple shapes at first. But now she was drawing people. A man with tired eyes, a girl with silver hair, a blue-skinned girl with a light inside her chest. I finished it, Leary said suddenly. Cal looked down. What is it? She turned the notebook around. On the page, she had drawn the 3 of them standing together under stars. Above their heads was a word, written in her careful, childlike handwriting. Family. Cal blinked. That's us? Leary nodded. You said we could choose who we are now, so I chose this. Vesa stepped forward and looked at the page. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, We don't belong to anyone else now. Leary smiled softly. We belong to each other. In the following days, they made changes to the ship. Vesa removed the backup gun rack from the hallway and replaced it with shelves for books and tools. Leary decorated her room with little lights and soft blankets Cal found in a trading station. She even named her bed the Nest. Cal converted the extra storage bay into a kitchen and filled it with ingredients from different planets. None of them cooked well, but they laughed every time they tried. There was no mission now, no escape plan, no war, just days living. One morning, Cal walked into the cockpit and found Leary asleep in the chair, her head resting on a pillow she had stitched herself. A small patch on the corner read, LR, her initials, like a badge of selfhood. He pulled a blanket over her shoulders and quietly sat beside her. Vesa entered a few minutes later, handing him a mug of hot leaf brew. She slept here all night, she said. She feels safe now, Cal replied. Vesa nodded. You gave her that. Cal shook his head. No, she gave it to herself. I just stood close enough to remind her she could. Vesa looked at him, eyes serious. You changed us. You saved me first, he said simply. That evening, while watching stars, Leary asked, Where will we go now? Cal thought for a moment. Anywhere. Everywhere. We could visit the green oceans of Helna Prime, or the floating cities on Draelos. We're not hiding anymore. Leary smiled. What if someone asks who we are? Vesa leaned forward. Tell them we're travelers. Leary giggled. That's boring. Cal grinned. Then tell them we're 3 orphans who found each other and decided to never let go. Leary looked thoughtful. I like that better. They all sat in silence for a moment, the stars outside blinking like distant promises. Then Leary said, Thank you. Cal turned to her. For what? For buying. Me, she said, even if it was for 1 drink. Vesa added softly, and for never treating us like something broken. Cal looked at them both. You weren't broken. You were just waiting to be seen. And so, the Emberhawk sailed on. Not as a ship of fugitives, not as a carrier of weapons, but as a home. A home with no walls of fear. A home where no one was owned. A home where a man once gave away a bottle of Earth whiskey and gained something more valuable than anything he'd ever imagined. A family.